So, Revenge of the Devs. What's that about? It's a recap of my personal PowerShell journey and what's become of it in view of the broader community. The compulsory speaker info: Evgenij Smirnov from Berlin, turning 49 next month, consultant at SVA, Cloud and Data Center Management MVP for the second year now. Couple of certifications. I run 3 Microsoft-themed user groups in Berlin, and since April, also the official VMware user group. Speakers are welcome for every single one of them. So if you guys have something to share, please hit me up on Twitter or email. My domain is in the footer of each slide. So there's been a development in the last 2 or 3 years in the broader PowerShell community that's been really pissing me off so much that I actually decided to get this off my chest. And it always starts with a tweet like this: upgrade from Windows PowerShell. You're missing out. We get to Windows PowerShell shaming. We get some ISE shaming, where thankfully every single time somebody chimes in and says a word in favor of that. SSH, all the things, forget WinRAM, forget PowerShell remoting. SSH is the new cool. But why? I'm an ops. I've always been an ops in one or capacity or another. So for me, it is basically the wrong direction this discussion is taking. And if you start to debate this thing with the devs, because these arguments are mostly come from the devs, it usually goes like this: why should I start scripting in PS7 when PS is totally fine as a for each object parallel? Well, for each parallel is just run spaces. I figured out how to do those like 10 years ago, right? It has the ternary operator now. Well, my journey was from DOS batch through VBS to PowerShell. I couldn't care less, never used that in any other shell or language I had to use. And besides, if then constructions are way more human readable from my personal point of view. But write progress is that much faster. I'm an enterprise scripter. My shit usually runs unattended. I don't care whether a progress bar is displayed or not, and usually it isn't. So why should I switch? Why should I start using it on Windows? Yeah, and that's how the discussion usually ends. Backwards, bloody Luddite, etc. But let's look where the developer's place was set in the original Monad Manifesto. Here's the value proposition from the Monad Manifesto by Jeffrey Snover. The application developers are not invited, apart from the product group, of course, to decide how the language should look like or how it's got to work. But they need to make sure that their own stuff that they are developing for their applications conform to PowerShell specification if they try to make that PowerShell ready. PowerShell is the language of ops, and ops are usually not language purists. There are exceptions, of course, but those just reinforce the rule, right? So a tabs versus spaces discussion is not an ops discussion. I can't imagine ops having that debate, but of course ops have their own versus topics. They are very popular still. But ops have other requirements. Products that ops uses have to be manageable, they have to be secure, they have to be well documented, they have to be easy to learn and easy to remember, and easy to revisit after like a year or more. Most of these requirements, in my opinion, have been fulfilled or nearly fulfilled with the latest version of Windows PowerShell. But these are not the requirements that tend to be important for the devs. In my experience, I haven't worked with every dev on the planet, but I had to work with some of them. And so from the ops perspective, let's look at the following question. What is the operational cost for the ops? Because ops are the ones doing the change. Moving completely to PowerShell, PowerShell Core, today it would be PowerShell 7, and maybe PowerShell 8 one day. Throughout the enterprise or throughout the organization, it may be in the public sector. And what are the benefits that will justify this move? What are we not talking about? We're not talking about a single individual or a small group of individuals pecking away at their workstations where they've got internet access and admin rights and basically the freedom to decide what they will be using as long as that produces results. Those guys can use whatever tools they like as long as that is documented, fairly secure, and achieves the objective. We're not talking about 100% non-Windows shops either, right? So, because for those guys, there is only PowerShell Core, and if I were to manage the non-Windows infrastructure, I would be very happy to have that. But in the case I've been seeing mostly over the last 20 years, we're talking about hundreds of servers and for the big part running Windows. We're talking about thousands of clients running Windows almost exclusively. Talking about Active Directory being a common authentication mechanism, at least in the Windows part, which is the bigger part of the whole infrastructure. We're talking about communicating with enterprise applications and other systems that use a mixture of web APIs or RPC calls or DCOM objects and maybe some other proprietary protocols that are just sitting on top of the network stacks. We're talking about organizations that may or may not employ software developers, but not for doing enterprise scripting. Those guys churn out some other enterprise software, which again may or may not be PowerShell enabled or even interested in becoming PowerShell enabled. Ops have always been overloaded, and in this mainstream use case, they're overloaded still. And I spent quite a while consulting for the public sector and for the banking sector. So introducing new technology will always need or entail a tremendous amount of red tape. So let's revisit that tweet in view of this mainstream case. Moving from Windows PowerShell to PowerShell Core on Windows is not an upgrade. It's a completely separate product with a different security posture, with different delivery technology, different patching technology, different underlying namespace, and so on. Outside of my own developer workstation or enterprise scripter workstation in this case, I need a compelling reason to introduce new technology. It has to, that's basically what we're talking about. Shall I be able to produce enough reasoning to convince my higher ups to move away from Windows PowerShell in the Windows domain and into PowerShell Core? The time my scripts may spend running is not always very important because many of them run unattended and nobody is sitting and waiting until they're finished. But even if somebody would be sitting and waiting until the script finished, it may not be the end of the world if the cost of waiting is maybe offset by the benefit of not having to manage stuff. But let's stick with the upgrade narrative for a minute and look at why we as ops upgrade our systems in the enterprise. There are plenty of reasons, or a number of reasons at least. One of the most important is our current version is not supported anymore, or it is not supported by some third party that is more important for us than the technology we're talking about. The next version would solve functional difficulties we have with the current one. The next version is more secure. The next version has a better usability for folks using it. The next version performs better. There is, of course, another reason that exists in every organization that has more than one level of management decision making in the organigram, because somebody said so, who has enough stars on the shoulder to be able to do it. We will not talk about that last one because people who introduce changes because reasons, they are usually deaf and blind to real reasoning. So it's not not the point of this talk to investigate that scenario. So what does moving to PowerShell vNext mean for the ops? It will most definitely entail refactoring the scripts because they have been breaking changes between 5.1 and PowerShell 7. Those scripts may have been running without issue for years, so refactoring them might introduce new bugs or errors or performance issues or whatever. Then we need to distribute PowerShell 7 to all the systems that we want to manage with PowerShell, or that we are managing with PowerShell now. If the goal is to upgrade to actually go PowerShell 7 all the way, this one is controversial because in if we were doing everything by the book, we would have to remove Windows PowerShell from the systems after installing PowerShell 7 on those, right? Or else it's not an upgrade. The old technology is still there. So we would basically start removing Windows PowerShell and break the whole functionality that relies intrinsically of Windows PowerShell. In fact, most of the things coming from the Windows Server or Windows itself, right? Moving all in on PowerShell vNext would include removal of WinRM-based PowerShell remoting and switching to SSH-based PowerShell remoting, which would take away GIA for those who have been using it and introduce new challenges like the impossibility of having pass-through authentication via Kerberos, which WinRM offers out of the box in the Windows domain. Next step would be removing the PowerShell ISE, because if we don't script for Windows PowerShell anymore, but rather for Windows 7, then the ISE becomes practically worthless. It can't run scripts in a PowerShell core host, and it hasn't got syntax highlighting for PowerShell core. VS Code or some other PowerShell editor. I'm seeing the spell checking has done its job and turned IDE into die. But well, it's the beauty of Microsoft Office, right? So VS Code would have to be distributed to all the systems where scripting is being done. And of course, because VS Code is not very helpful without extensions, the extensions that we need to for our scripting needs would have to be distributed as well. And then to complete the journey, we would have to refactor the scripts again to actually move from the level where scripts are runnable on PowerShell core to the level where we actually take advantage of PowerShell core feature. And last but not least, it's ops talking here. We would have to incorporate the new tool set, the whole PowerShell core, OpenSSH, remoting, and VS Code or whatever editor we decided upon into our existing ITSM processes. Patching, security review, version control, software distribution, etc. Let's look at those reasons to upgrade one at a time. Our current version is not supported anymore. Well, on Windows, it has very good chances to remain supported for the next 10 years, because Server 2022, now RTM, contains Windows PowerShell 5.1. The Windows 11 Insider build that I believe everybody present has on their laptops, or at least on some of their laptops, contains Windows PowerShell 5.1. For an enterprise scripter, there are still benefits in writing scripts that would conform even to an earlier version of Windows PowerShell, because there are applications that are too important to just throw away, but that would not support anything better than Server 2008 R2. And Server 2008 R2 is still supported if you run it on Azure. So Server 2008 R2 is still a thing. Believe me, Windows 7 is still a thing. I know of organizations comprising like 10,000 Windows 7 clients that will not have upgraded to Windows 10 until ESU expires. So you would have to migrate those systems one day, but if the migration entails running scripts, those scripts will probably have to be running on the PowerShell version that is installed in those systems. I've had that discussion several times. I wrote a nice module that would speed up migration of user profiles. I wrote it for Windows 8, PowerShell 4. It would not run on 2. And then I was tasked with the migration of a couple of hundred Windows 7 endpoints. And I asked, they had software distribution in place. I asked them to just push Windows Management Framework 5 to those machines. I never got permission to do that. So I've had to refactor my module in order for it to be compatible with PowerShell 2.0 because that's what was on those machines. In another scenario, I even had to fall back to VBS, but that's a completely another story. OpenSSH in the Microsoft variety may or may not be supported on one of the OS's ops. Still has the support in the enterprise. Well, to be honest, there are already vendors out there who produce modules for their systems that are targeted for core. But I've not yet met a system of this kind that would require pushing out PowerShell core on each and every endpoint or server. It's usually a handful of machines where you can easily install PowerShell core alongside Windows PowerShell and just treat it as a part of that application. And if that application gets patched, then part of that patching would be looking up the current version of PowerShell 7 and patching that as well. This is manageable. Pushing out PowerShell 7 instead of Windows PowerShell on thousands of endpoints and hundreds of servers maybe not be manageable or not as manageable. This is probably the most controversial one. Windows PowerShell vNext solves functional problems that we would have had with PowerShell 5.1. Well, in my opinion, and I've done my best many times over the last years to actually revise that opinion, to actually design a use case for myself to start using PowerShell 7 on Windows, but I'm still to find a real use case for that, because PowerShell 7 still lacks features. Not all underlying components of .NET Full exist in .NET Core, so the compatibility has improved drastically, but it's still not at 100%. So feature-wise, for managing an infrastructure, here's ops talking, for managing an infrastructure, feature-wise, moving to PowerShell 7 would be a step backwards. Still no GIA in SSH remoting. Not everybody got to using GIA, but people who did have built parts of their security infrastructure on that. So SSH remoting would be a step backwards for those in regard to security and rights delegation. And the improvements in the language itself, which would be the last reason I can think of, are mostly items devs care about rather than ops. And the ops wouldn't know those things are possible because ops usually don't know a bunch of programming languages, right? So the ops weren't missing those features. And so as an ops, I have a hard time considering features like ternary operators a problem now solved. What about cross-platform? Are there functional problems solved there? Well, of course, with an advent of PowerShell 7, or PowerShell 6 for that matter, the whole cross-platform management paradigm has shifted. So we have PowerShell on those other systems, on those Linux or Unix or Mac OS systems. So this is, of course, a great leap forward, but it would be, or it's my experience and my opinion, but you would be struggling to write a script, however long, for managing parts of the infrastructure that would be truly cross-platform without branching out according to the operating system platform it's being run on. So you still need to be aware, or your scripts will still need to be aware which platforms they are running on. So as an enterprise scripter, I say invest a couple of days and try to locate the functions where you would need those branches and put them into a module. Put them into a module that does that branching out. Then you can write cross-platform scripts. But if you design such a module, you could very well point it to PowerShell 5.1. So it would conform to core on Linux and to 5.1 on Windows, and everybody could write cross-platform code using that module in a concrete organization, right? Security. Well, I'm not in a position to do an exact evaluation on whether .NET Core is more mature in terms of security than .NET 4 is, but there have been vulnerabilities with a ranking of 8 recently. So patching becomes an issue. Patching has never been optional, but it's even less so in view of those vulnerabilities. The product group has delivered Microsoft update-based servicing of PowerShell Core in preview. Whether or not and when it's coming to Windows Server update services, because most of the organizations I did consulting for in the last 10 years wouldn't allow an endpoint or infrastructure server and unrestricted access to the internet, even if it's to Windows or Microsoft update. Most of them will have something in between, usually an update services server or or a software distribution server. So this journey is far from complete, but there has been movement in the right direction. Does not, as far as I've gathered, pertain to OpenSSH project, which would be needed for PowerShell remoting, and VS Code, which is a completely separate product. SSH remoting, lacks Kerberos support. So no GSS API, no pass-through authentication, even on Windows, if we stick to SSH remoting, GIA or not. Yeah, so organizations that have adopted the security model of running a script in a certain security context and then having it remote seamlessly to other systems to do tasks on those systems or gather information from those systems, they will have to look for other ways to achieve that, which brings us to credential management. The secret management module that the product group has published is cross-platform, but unfortunately, the secret vaults that I might want to explore in my organization are not, because they are written by third parties. So, so I may be in luck and able to find a suitable module for moving to semi-transparent SSH remoting from a transparent WinRM remoting, but I might not be as well. Better usability. Again, that's what started this discussion. For devs, there may be a greatly improved usability in terms of language constructs that they now have at their disposal. PS readline and script analyzer engine, which of course assists with creating code, right? Or those AI-based helpers, like what Chrissy is going to talk about afterwards. But for ops, there is not very much improvement in terms of usability, because new language options that one of those enterprise scripters may adopt because they are because they have more of a dev DNA in them, or have better learning capability, or greater will to learn, or whatever. They might start using those new language constructs, like the ternary operator, for instance, but their teammates will not be able to easily understand what the code does, right? Deployment and service capabilities for ops is the manageability of a software technology, a part of its usability, right? So those options are lacking as of today. And SSH remoting, whoever used GIA for remoting, for delegation of remoting permissions, will have to look for other ways to achieve that goal. VNext performs better. That's what everybody keeps saying. Yeah, your mileage may vary, right? I didn't yet find a scenario where PowerShell 7 would actually perform worse. So there may be a real truth to that statement. But for Windows PowerShell targeted script, which have undergone a performance optimization by somebody who, gave some mind to performance optimization and took the time to do that, I don't think there is so much to be gained by running them in a PowerShell 7 run space. Unattended script execution may not, at the end of the day, benefit from performance improvements at all, because unattended scripts that run in the scheduler or that are triggered by some portal like Script Runner or Universal Automation or whatever, it's not always that crucial that they finish promptly. Whether my script that creates a user identity, for instance, runs for 5 or for 10 minutes, it doesn't really matter, because I won't be onboarding so many users at once that that would become an issue. And for each individual user, well, they will usually run this script at the end of the month before the user actually needs that identity. So not very much to be gained there either. There are many performance optimization techniques that have been known to ops for upwards of 10 years. And people, like many of those present here today, have actually tried to teach those techniques to folks, put out blog posts or videos or talk at conferences, even hold workshops in their respective organization on performance optimization. But what I'm seeing in the field, very many ops have not embraced those techniques. So for those, whatever performance their scripts are running with, it has basically to be good enough. And if it's not good enough, then, well, yeah, PowerShell is bad, or the script is bad, but they learn to live with it rather than pay attention to those optimization techniques. So many ops have not embraced any of those techniques, and they won't benefit from some other tool that maybe runs a bit faster. They will still use ineffective techniques in their scripts that will ultimately negate all the performance improvements another PowerShell version might bring with it. So putting these factors into context, putting it all together. So what do we have on the cost side? What does it cost? Not in terms of money, but in terms of man hours, frustration, human errors leading to downtime in systems, cutting through the red tape. What does it cost an ops organization to implement a complete move to PowerShell 7 in a Windows heavy environment? Analyze and refactor tons of scripts, because if there aren't tons of scripts, then there is not much incentive to move to another PowerShell technology either. If they haven't been using the current one, why should they consider moving to another one, right? Cut through the red tape. So basically, this is being recorded now, and if the manager in charge of the decision chances upon this recording, they will probably decline approval for this move. Then, once the approval have been granted, ops have to deploy and maintain PS7 on a variety of systems. It would be easier on Linux, because for many Linux distributions, you can patch from repo. You can download the repo to a mirror, which is on site, and you can patch from that mirror. And many distributions have PowerShell 7 or 6 in their mainstream repo. Not so easy on Windows. Again, once the product group has sat down with the update services product group and they figured out how to deliver PowerShell 7 updates to Windows systems, this will be less of a factor, but now it's a great factor. Urgent patching PowerShell 7 in an organization that has not very much in terms of software configuration management is an undertaking. Establish SSH remoting capabilities. Find replace for GIA if it has been used before. Educate ops on using SSH remoting, basically on using and using explicit authentication or cryptographic keys instead of just using pass-through. Deploy and maintain VS Code or another IDE to all the stations where scripts are written. Analyze and remove legacy tag. Good luck with that. Good luck with figuring out what will break if you remove PowerShell 5 from a Windows server. And then, in an organization of a significant size, there will always be systems that you cannot move over to PowerShell 7 just now. And those will be exceptions to whatever rules ops may have established for PowerShell maintenance and management. And that's what kills ops time-wise, because you always need to deal with those systems individually when they don't conform to the overall policies and rules, right? So what's on the benefit side? Refactoring may or may not help weed out some previous errors, or find scripts that are no longer needed but still get executed by the scheduler on a regular basis, and maybe fill disks with logs or whatever. But refactoring, of course, has a potential of introducing some new bugs as well. The organization will be prepared for the day Windows PowerShell goes out of support. Well, I plan to have retired when this day should become reality. How about you? Cross-platform scripting becomes slightly easier, but as I said earlier, it still requires knowledge of the platform-specific differences and platform-specific features. Maybe improvements in execution time, whether those are significant and important or not is for each organization to decide. And of course, scripting aids like Script Analyzer or Autopilot, Copilot, of course, not Autopilot, become available with moving to the new technology. And now, no need for younger ops that just starting their IT journey to learn old tech, to learn PowerShell 5 or PowerShell 4 or PowerShell 2 or whatever PowerShell there may be or may have been in the organization before. Now that these, well, not facts, but opinions have been laid on the table, it's for everybody to decide whether or not it looks like a great deal for the respective organization. Thank you very much.
Woo! I love this presentation, and I hope that you submit it to PSConf EU.
I didn't. I submitted it to the summit actually earlier this year, but unsurprisingly that got rejected. Because many of the folks that promote this dev point of view about this move, many of those are on the committee, right?
You made such great points throughout it, and it's a lot of the same points that I talk about too. I think that like, you know, with Seattle being this cloud-centric culture, like I remember I was telling one of the PM team members, I was like, I love PS5 because it is on all of my machines. I can guarantee that I don't have to go through an exhaustive process the way that I would with Python or any kind of third-party product. It is an easy sell. Yep. And he was basically like, on-prem exists, was kind of the feeling that I got. And I think that's perhaps the root of the problem. with the kind of the marketing of PS7. But man, you really laid out. I don't know if you saw the chat while you were presenting, but it's just like, yes, exactly, totally.
Yeah.
We missed some of the other guys who were saying, no, you have to deploy it. So it's a one-sided conversation in this group, definitely.
Right.
I think then we have mostly sysadmins or system engineers here because they have to work day out, day in with this. And like you said, Chrissy, is it there? I want to work with something that's here, and I can use it right on from the start. So if I deploy a system, I don't want to install another agent, another software, just so I can automate it.
Right. It's such a huge selling point that it's just always there everywhere that I go. And that's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to that I even wanted to keep and add support for SQL Server 2000 is because it's always going to be there. And I might inherit an environment where I do have to work with that. And I was actually just given props to the SQL Management Objects team, the SMO team, because I created a Windows 7 VM today, and I installed SQL Server 2000, and I used DBA tools to connect to SQL Server 2000, and then I used it to connect to the cloud. And so, you know, there is that support of, you know, just years and years. And whenever you were talking about how things are, you know, you're like, oh, I'm gonna be retired by the time that this is sunsetted. And I was like, exactly. Like, if people are still using something from 21 years ago, it's always going to be there. I am gonna talk to some people to let them know just how this is it's not just a great presentation that completely represents all of my views as well, but I think that it would also be a great presentation for us to be able to talk about as a community, because probably the people like us are kind of feeling left out, you know, with that huge push. And I do see the benefits of PowerShell 7. I love it. I love GitHub Actions. I use it all the time, but I develop on 5.1, and I program as like a PowerShell 3 kind of syntax person. But yeah, I'm totally, I just loved this presentation the whole way through. And so I'm really, really glad that you gave it and that I was here tonight.
Thank you. So, objective achieved.
Now we have some more faces. No, it was really great presentation. Thank you for that. Good starting point for the evening.
Yeah, but
go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but maybe I can give some other perspective here. So I used to work in big environments, so lots of Windows servers and stuff like that. And so for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I've been basically doing Azure only. And for me, so all these environments that I designed, created, built up, and that are now being run by someone else, they don't really rely on Windows servers anymore. So so basically, so in a context where yeah, big companies, so they move slow. So right, so they're very slow. So when it's a government, they're even slower. And so, but at some point, I think this will also be yeah, just one final platform, but maybe I'm retired by then.
I think so. I think all of us.
Yeah.
And I think another good point is for keeping the old scripts is like I work as a consultant. So I go into customer and I cannot say to them, yeah, so let's now deploy PowerShell 7 on all of your endpoints so that my scripts work fine. They expect me to work with that what they have and in their environment. And PowerShell was a great leap forward because of that. Now we had a platform we could build on and we could automate on, and we had something like WinRM, and it's great. Today I had to do something dumb like a GP update on 400 machines, and if I don't have WinRM, then I'm screwed. So this is a one-liner, and I send it up and everything is good. And if I have to do it by hand or deploy SSH keys first, then I have another problem on my hand.
Yeah, what I did not understand is why didn't they deploy PowerShell 7 and PowerShell 5.1 to the systems? Yeah, we know we can run it in parallel. Yeah, why don't they deploy to the new server or Windows 11 PowerShell 7 and 5.1? Yeah, because I always run in trouble if I'm using PowerShell 7. I'm missing VMI, WMI things and all that stuff. So I have to switch back to PowerShell 5.1. And as you already told, yeah, the problem is if you have 2,000 systems out in the field or more, how to deploy PowerShell 7 and keep it updated. This is the question. And if we had the chance with the new operating system to get the new PowerShell 7 automatically, the more and more PowerShell 7 will be used.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, of course, it's the same story all over again. Do you know the story how PowerShell 2 has made it into Server 2008?
No.
It was about to be thrown out at the product conference and at the final conference before Server 2008. We're about to go RTM. PowerShell, which was initially included into the operating systems build, was about to be thrown out by the server PG, and then the Exchange PG stood up and said, our whole product, it was Exchange 2007 at the time,
Yeah.
our whole product is based on PowerShell, so please, this stays in, or we will piss off the folks who try to install Exchange on those machines, right? So Exchange led to PowerShell 2 becoming a part of the operating system. So maybe what it needs is an equally strong advocate from some other technology to repeat this process basically with the PowerShell core.
I think the PowerShell team has to fight many battles, and if you read between the lines how much work they have to put in just to get this on the Windows Update services,
yeah,
it must be a hell of a fight internally. And now they are working through, I just tested it on Windows 11. You can set a registry key by now, and this will install PowerShell from Microsoft Update. So this is the first step, and it's great, and they will update it. But I think they need more internal backup to push that forward, because this would make it much more easier. Put out both versions, update them side by side, and then even you can throw out WinRM in PowerShell 7, because you would have SSH for those and WinRM for the 5 version, and it's perfectly coexistence.
Yeah.
I think that's something else that is missing, though, is that it does use different DLLs and libraries, and we need more core. We're facing that with SQL Server. Like whenever I added a lot of Linux support to DBA tools, something I'm missing is like replication. And also, what's the other big one? SQL Server integration services as well. There's no core available. So because of WinRM and because there's some things that are still lagging behind, we do have 78% coverage, which is really nice. Well, we introduced a few new commands, so now it's 77.2% of our commands work in Linux. But yeah, it will be really helpful if we get more core libraries from Microsoft and vendors as well.
Yeah. Active Directory. There is
Yes,
no
yes.
Active Directory support in core on Linux.
Whew.
Yes. So I'm pretty sure that that will never be there, to be honest.
No, maybe. I think
don't know.
SQL Server supports AD on Linux, so maybe it'll be possible.
I think the AD team, even if we don't see any progress publicly, they will publish some updates in the future, and Active Directory will be there for years to come. And even if there's Azure AD, there's still use cases for big companies to use their current multi-forests like Hydra Active Directory, and they have to use it because they cannot just move to the cloud like a 200 people company or a 2,000 people company.
Just like that.
The Active Directory team has been hiring recently, so
hey,
there must be work to do there.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Looking at the improvements they've made towards Server 2022, it's actually surprising.
Yeah,
but they did some improvements.
No, that was an attempted irony.
So then let's move over to Chrissy.
Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to get my windows to work.
Fine. I think.
All right, cool. Is it showing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Sweet. All right, so Fabian actually asked me to speak tonight because I've been so excited about the GitHub Copilot, which is currently in preview. If you use VS Code, you can actually install the extension, but then you can't activate it until you are approved. So if you go to probably copilot.github.com and sign up for the preview, there's a lot of people that have been getting in, but it's been really fun. And especially whenever I'm working on TypeScript, I'm learning TypeScript, and it's been really cool to just, in that case, I'm a beginner, and so I can use comments to say what it is that I want to do, and then Copilot will do that for me. So let's take a look. I actually didn't have an introduction, and then in the previous session, you were like, you have to have it. And so, right, my name is Chrissy LeMaire. I'm a dual Microsoft MVP awarded for my work in both PowerShell and SQL Server, and I am also a GitHub star. You can find me on Twitter at CL. So if you have any questions or if you want to see some GitHub Copilot hype, then you can follow me there. So this is kind of how it works. First of all, they got all of their code from public, non-private GitHub repositories, and then also all the code and text and like probably Stack Overflow and all across the internet. And they take that, they put it into something called OpenAI Codex model. I don't really know that much about it, but it seems like Microsoft is investing a lot into that. So that goes to the GitHub service. You start up your VS Code, and then it talks back and forth, and it'll autocomplete all of your stuff in really amazing ways. So the first way that I'm going to show you, this is actually a slide deck from GitHub, and this is what they're showing people. It's written in Python, which was cool because it's GitHub Copilot is one of my favorite learning utilities because I'm sitting there and I'm watching the code happen. Especially, like with Python, I'm like, oh, that's how you would do it. So let's go ahead and watch. It's really comment driven, so it's pretty cool. Here we say Twitter API credentials from environmental variables. And this is what really happens. A lot of times as I'm working with Copilot, I'm just tabbing all the way through. And it's magical. We'll be watching some things with PowerShell shortly. So this is them sending a tweet, and it'll just pop all that in. How does it work with PowerShell? Very well. I was surprised. Poor PowerShell, it seems like a lot of times it's left behind, but with GitHub Copilot, it's been really awesome. So here we could see that we have the message text and then it's sending it. And then whenever you make these changes, it'll actually send it back to GitHub, and then so that it can become smarter over time. So now they're going to run this code. Somebody actually created an entire Visual Studio Code extension using solely Copilot, which I would have loved to have seen a video about. So you can see here, that's pretty much what it looks like, sending out a tweet. I find whenever I'm working with PowerShell and GitHub Copilot that a lot of times it takes away the boring part, you know, like if I need to type in like dash something, it'll just automatically fill that in. And it was something that I was about to do, but I'm kind of saving those strokes there. So now I will say this is a pretty hard presentation because a lot of times I have like very strict ways and I'll practice a bunch of times, but because it's like this live living being, it's really hard to practice. So doing what I can. So here we have Copilot even knows quantum chemistry in addition to PowerShell, to Python, to TypeScript, which it was helping me learn. Somebody posted some quantum chemistry stuff, and then he posted the picture. So I don't know what any of this is, but he did say, and he messaged me on LinkedIn even, and he was like, Chrissy, my mind is blown. I can't believe it. This is all accurate, which I thought was pretty cool. So this is a quantum algorithm, and they just start right there. So here he typed this out, and then it provides solutions along the way. So he was taking a look at the solutions, and this is another solution that was shockingly accurate. Then if you go to my my Twitter, you could see a lot of the things. Just today, it was shocking that I'm about to release a new version of DBA tools. And whenever I do the release, I actually wanted it to be in draft. And so I hit dash dash and it was like draft. And it just totally blows my mind. And this is another one that I'm going to show you that I had this function called test host OS Linux, and it wrote the next function for me. And then right here, this is an example of, I don't know how to do TypeScript at all. I'm kind of like hacking through it because that's the way that I learn to kind of reverse engineer. And instead of, you know, looking up on the web, going to Stack Overflow, looking for examples, I just talk to it. And I say loop through each folder, and then this is how you would do it in TypeScript, which totally blew my mind. All right, and then what I'm going to do is open this one up and then tell it to do some things. As an advanced PowerShell person, on a day-to-day basis, I know exactly what I want to type and program. And so I don't really find myself too much doing blocks of code. However, or even talking to it, like if you put in the comments. However, like I said before, as a beginner for something, I think it's awesome, but it is also cool if you're advanced, just to watch it happen. So now we're going to look at add DBA DB mirror monitor. And we are going to tell it, I'm going to come down here. First, I'm going to create, I'm going to like work through a command. And it's very important to have context. Like a lot of times, whenever I first started this, I opened up a blank file, and then I saved it as a PS1, and I was like, why isn't it working? And then I filed the bug report. But it turns out it's really important to have a bunch of context, and we'll see that with the Linux command momentarily. But here we have a command called add DBA DB mirror monitor, and I'm going to work through it by talking to it. And the next time, I'm actually going to build the command from scratch. So let's just say here, I will say, let's see, create a connection to SQL Server and execute select one. And then I really like this. It actually, as an advanced PowerShell person, I do use it a lot for my documentation and my examples, and it even helped me design a certificate validator recently, which I thought was cool. So let's see. So this is interesting, system.data.sql client.sql connection. This is a totally valid way to set it up. Not within DBA tools, but in general. So we're gonna go, and that was simple. Ooh, even threw in a try. It's true, we do use execute. This is really cool. So the scalar, or the scholar, I don't even know. It only returns like one column with one row. So this was exactly what I needed. That's awesome. What comes next? GitHub. Yes. Almost. That's actually something that it got from down here. So that kind of shows you the context that it's working with, which I thought was impressive. This one, by the way, I wrote this, I'm really excited. I was trying to replicate functionality from PowerShell Studio, the way that it would like filter down, but it wasn't built into VS Code. So this is what I actually created in TypeScript. So let's go look at this Linux command that I tried it on, and I was at work and it started like typing out all the stuff I needed, and I was so taken aback, and in my own world I started clapping. So this is test host OS Linux. Check it out. No, come on. This might be my last GitHub Copilot presentation. Let's do it. Okay, how about this? Hold on. Are you enabled? Yes. Okay. Do what you did at work and on TV, or not on TV, in my tweet. Okay, there we go. I swear it didn't do this before. There we go. Whew. All right. So if we just hit tab, then it literally knew that the next command I would probably want to test for is Windows, which is magical. It knew the param, which surprised me because it's very like PowerShell centric, I feel. And so it's going to create totally valid PowerShell code. Look at this. And so, you know, I just spent a lot of time, tabbing, tab. And now it knows that I want to connect. And then it literally, yes. So sometimes it's interesting. You can actually go through, if you hit Control and then the bracket, it'll go through the suggestions. Sometimes it'll say NT, sometimes Windows. Sometimes the tabbing stuff doesn't really work for me. Let's see, but it'll close this off. And there it has written a just a little baby function for me, but now I want to make a whole command. So let's see if it knows, you know, the things that we're used to, like synopsis and description and so on. Going to create a new file. Uh-oh, I need to, hold on, let me disable my do not disturb. Do not disturb until tomorrow. All right, okay. So now I'm going to save this as test DBA computer certificate. No, you know what? Just certificate. Certificate expiration.ps1. All right. So why is it doing that? I don't even know. It usually doesn't. Function test DBA computer, oh, sorry, certificate. I will say this, I don't think that it's a Copilot thing. I'm having issues just with my VS Code in general. I don't know if y'all are as well. It's driving me crazy. It's like not fixing my problems. It won't tab for me. Yeah, y'all too? Yeah, it's driving me crazy. So the first thing that I want, I'm glad to know it's not just me, is in the past, whenever I've done this, it's actually filled in synopsis for me. And then it'll even checks if a certificate is expiring soon. How cool. Oops. All right. And then the formatter in general is kind of messed up right now. Okay, good to know. Because I was like, did I miss something? Do I need to like downgrade or upgrade? And then I think I tried upgrading and then it was even worse. So we have the path, maybe. I don't know. What about description? Okay, let's see what it says. Checks if the certificate is expiring soon and returns the number of days remaining. How awesome. All right, let's take it. Parameter domain. I don't know if I want that. Let's see, probably computer name because I want to do it remotely. Nice. And then, oh my God, yeah, certificate thumbprint, that would come in handy. I love the auto-completing stuff for docs. It comes up with my examples and everything. There you go, thank you. Let's see, what you gonna do? No. Rad, yeah, look how cool. So it even knows about PowerShell's piping abilities. You know what I do want in there though, and this was something that it actually suggested whenever I was building this other command, which is test DBA computer certificate expiration. It actually suggested the threshold, and I was eventually going to add threshold, but it was awesome that it suggested it so early on. It's so good. Hopefully you'll be able to get it soon. Go ahead and sign up, and a lot of my friends are getting it. Let's see. All right, so I do want to add a threshold. Actually, oh look, it even knows sometimes you probably do it in days. The number of days before expiration of that certificate is considered expiring soon. How does it know? All right, so let's move on. Let's see what it'll say for this example. No, I need some words. Connects, let's see if it'll, yeah, to server 01 and checking. I like that. That's all right, it's good enough. Okay, so now we're gonna do some commandlet binding. Did you see that? What? And I don't know about y'all, but like my other autocomplete never worked. The one where it's supposed to like fill it in, I don't know, from the integrated console never worked for me, but this does. It is. All right. Nah, I guess it could, but I don't want. Let's start with some params. Or param singular. I never get that right. Some PS2 syntax. All right. Okay, pretty good so far. What up? What? All right. And what? Probably threshold days. This is so fun. Oh, did y'all see that? So it also, not only did it finish it off to say days, but it also had suggested 30 days. That's exactly how many days I want it to be by default. And let's just see what it comes up with next. Certificate thumbprint, which is up there in the parameters. And then that's really all that I want. And it knows. So there we go. And all right, this is fun. It actually taught me, I didn't even realize this, that there's some like subtract method in PowerShell, and I had never used it before. Like, I think that I'd probably used it with getDate, but definitely not the way that GitHub Copilot suggested. And so I'm actually able to learn PowerShell as well. So let's see. If that, then do what? This is pretty all right. Let's change this so that we could teach the engine to say output instead of host. Oops. All right. Nice. I bet that this works. We should try it. But I don't have a valid thumbprint right off the bat, but this really looks like some legit code. And then what's it gonna, oh, else what? Oh, the certificate is, oh, look, it learned just now instead of host, it's output. Now we really want to do a PS custom object, which it's all right about. I wouldn't say return 0 is totally valid, but you could see that GitHub Copilot it's really a lot of fun. Something else that we're gonna do is, let's talk to it, because that's where I think a lot of the magic comes in. You know how you always have to check for like getting the username of username at domain. You can just ask it to get it for you. So let me close this off. So that's there, that's there. I don't really know why this isn't working. What's up? Is it maybe because of that? Is it because of that? Oh, that's why. I have OTSB or whatever it's called, my syntax formatting in VS Code. I default to that one. Okay, so let's talk to it. Get username in email address. See, here's where the context comes in, but there is an email address associated in certificates, which is pretty cool. And then I would prefer it. You know what I would like to teach it? This is one of my favorite things because it's way prettier. I never really liked those brackets. So I'm just going to teach it. Sorry, y'all. You probably don't like this, but I do. I'm going to say first one. Sweet. All right. So that's assert username. And then, oh my God, I love this. There's like these really exciting moments where, you know, it's just like I did first and now it's picking up last. This bomb. You know, like I love PowerShell because it's so human readable. I remember the first time that I discovered first, then I was like exploring. I couldn't believe that there's like trim start, trim in, first, last, skip. I was like trying those and it was working. And so back in the day, PowerShell was kind of my co-pilot as well. Okay, so the next thing that we usually do, oh, you know what was awesome? I used this just recently in DBA tools. Check if credential is good. I think that the context is going to be too messed up. Yeah, it totally will. But let me show you. It was in my command connect DBA instance. So I'll show you some legit like production code that it wrote for me. There it is. If tenant is specified with a GUID username such as this, and this was actually written by GitHub Copilot, and I was so excited whenever I tried it and it actually worked. Because that is something that would have annoyed me. I'd have had to like copy paste from Stack Overflow like 4 times. It does. No, see, it's like the opposite of being screwed because like having to know regex is being screwed, but now I don't even have to care. And let me see what else I have in my little demo because this is a little short one. It's petite. Ooh, elapsed time. You know, we do that all the time. Look at this. This actually, not only whenever I typed this out, I typed in get users. It loves checking for get users who haven't logged in X amount, but it wrote all of this out for me. So let me go and see if it'll do it in our fake little command. Okay. Check if check elapsed time since certificate was installed. Yeah. Okay, let's try it. No, certificate install date. I don't think so. Okay. Since certificate expired. So we have the expiry date. Okay. Oh, look at that. Sweet. So that tells you basically that there's the 3 years. And I really liked that. We did the is Linux and the elapsed time and then the users. Let's see what it does if we say get users. Get users in domain. Holy shit, that would work. That would totally work, wouldn't it? How cool is that? I love it. And that concludes my presentation. I hope that you're as excited about GitHub Copilot as I am. I think that working with it for the past like 3 months, sorry, not 3 months, the past like whenever it came out and it was announced, I was like a day after. I don't use it as much on my day-to-day as I am now that I'm advanced, except for the documentation. I use it a lot there. But I think that if you're trying to learn a new language, it's super invaluable.
That's crazy.
Isn't it awesome?
Really, really good.
Yeah, I do need that. It's looks very helpful in boring tasks.
I shouldn't have selected. I use it a few times a week when I said I wanted to test it. Oh, I'm back on the list.
Yeah, it's so you did sign up. Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, I know of like no timelines or anything like that, and I also don't know like how much they'll charge, if they'll charge or whatever. But it's so much fun to use, especially whenever it works. And like it knew that last one, because actually, you know what? I'm gonna take it back. I do use it a lot more, but not for giant blocks of code. Like the TypeScript and Python and Go people are lucky because they are getting those, and apparently the quantum physicists are getting those giant blocks of code. And I don't know if it's like my settings or what. I get bit by bit. But I will say, yeah, it totally finishes off whenever I want first and last and stuff like that. It's magical.
And it's crazy how fast it is adapting. So you changed it, and the next line was, you like that one more. Let's do it like that.
I love that. I actually didn't even realize that. I'm glad that I caught it on film. There's a lot of things that I've seen that I've wanted to catch on film so that I could share it. But then the next time that you do it, it's kind of different, which is why I'm like, man, it's kind of terrifying presenting about this because it's, is not predictable entirely. But for the most part, yeah, it's a joy. And I know that there's a lot of controversy, but, we look at Google all the time and, because people are like, oh, this will dumb down the skills of beginners. And I'm like, no, even whenever you're advanced, you're still going to look up the format of a GUID. You're still going to look up, like, I don't know, getting the elapsed. I'll never know how to do elapsed in PowerShell by heart. And now I don't have to because it'll just finish my sentence.
We'll just put out Google search a little bit behind because
exactly.
You both have to switch to your browser and type in, how do I do that?
Right.
And everybody does it.
Everybody. Yep. So I think that this is just making the process a bit faster. But it was really fun. Whenever it did that test is Windows thing and then it went through, I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm at work. And then they laughed, so it was fine.
What is she doing?
I know. Why is she having fun at work? So I hope that y'all enjoyed the presentation.
That was really great.
Awesome. Do y'all have any questions? If you have any questions, you could like tweet me or that you remember later, and then I'll try to find out. If I don't know the answer now. Glad I answered all your questions.
I think there's maybe something coming up
in
the chat.
Somebody's typing.
You're gonna put IIS reset out of business. It's so true. I ask him all the time for advanced stuff. If only it could do reflection, then he would really be out of business.
We have to be careful. I think he will learn stuff that we can't understand. And it's like, okay, that might be right, but it might be breaking our code completely.
Yeah, it was fun doing it with TypeScript. There's more lines of code offered, and But whenever I got pretty advanced, like not knowing anything about TypeScript, it wasn't super successful, but it did give me the words that and the context in my own brain to go out and search, which was one of my biggest problems when learning TypeScript. I didn't even know how to search, and it helped me with that.
Right, TypeScript.
Right. So I'm like VS Code, open window in TypeScript, and then it was all the wrong. It just wasn't doing it right. Well, thank y'all for having me. It's been fun. Oh, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, Caroline. Have a good night.